have to confront who's given us this problem. And in lots of ways, it was the cultural theory community. Because what the cultural theorists did was they latched on to a lot of the old stuff in our society, which they rightly said was bad, okay? And they said, you know what, if we're going to eliminate this stuff, we've really got to kind of try to get rid of a lot of the discourse around particular issues such as race or class or something like that. Well, what they did was they ended up constraining the debate, so we have a situation where we can no longer talk meaningfully about groups of people and what they're going to do. And the minute that you lose that ability to talk about groups of people and what they're going to do, not individuals, but groups of people, then you start losing a sense of history. Because basically, what is history except a discussion about groups of people? And when you lose that sense of history, you also profoundly lose the ability for yourself as a society to chart a course towards some kind of goal. Okay? What you've done is you've turned the entire idea of discourse into a legalistic proposition that's no longer intended to convey information between people and enhance understanding. And instead, you've turned it into a status-oriented operation, where if I say the right things and I think the right things, then my status is elevated. And so basically what has happened, because of the cultural theorists, and I hold them responsible, is that we have shifted at some level from a goal-oriented society to a status-oriented society. You can't constrain civil discourse like that. And I am a profound defender of both people on the left and the right with their right to say what they want, because this constraint of civil discourse has really screwed us up. So let's think about what else has really screwed us up. Well, something that also has really screwed us up is the notion in the professional communities that unless you are a professional in a particular area, you have no right to talk about stuff. And so here I am, I'm a mechanical engineering professor. I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about all sorts of different stuff on this blog, okay? No question about that. Nothing is really off limits except stuff that doesn't interest me, and that's my choice because it's my blog, right? But basically what has happened with this same shift from becoming a goal-oriented society to a status-oriented society is that now people won't speak up, even when they know information. Because if they're not a professional, there must be someone who, quote-unquote, knows better. And that quote-unquote person, that quote-unquote knows better, is part of a huge piece of the problem that we are having across our society. And what that does is it's gotten us into 2 wars. It's caused us to have a crashing economy, because the people that get to talk about the economy are people from Harvard or Princeton or Yale or something like that, when there are obvious things, obvious data that you can go out, observations that people can make that are very plainly obvious, and they can't be spoken because that person does not have the appropriate status in the society, and so therefore their opinion cannot be valued. So let's show how this works real quick with, just real quick, this blog is started on July 29th, 2010. We're in the middle of the quagmire in Afghanistan. Okay. And so basically we're there. There's probably very little rational reason why we are there now, almost 10 years after 9/11, but we still continue to persist. What are we fighting over in Afghanistan? We're fighting in a place that is known, of course, as the Graveyard of Empires. We're fighting over, when I see pictures, I have not been to Afghanistan. It's one of the places I would like to go. It's on my list when things settle down. But basically, we're fighting over a place that looks like the backside of Mars. And we're firing missiles and killing people who are, a lot of them are basic tribes people. a lot of the Pashtuns. There's a whole history there, and we'll cover that in a separate incident on the blog. You know, that were separated a long time ago by the British. We're fighting over the vestiges of this colonial empire. And there's no rational reason why we're there. There's no data-supported reason why we're there. Terrorists now have gone. We've wiped out all the terrorist training camps. You know, in fact, all we keep on doing is basically supporting the same people that the Soviet Union used to support when they lost the war in Afghanistan. And apparently this is an interesting day to record, because now there's all sorts of information that, of course, people knew the rational case was weak and they didn't do it, but they persisted anyway. And why did they persist? Well, they persisted because of the idea that the United States would lose status. Not that they wouldn't reach their goals, but they would lose status if they got out of the war. And some of the architects of the war are going to lose status. They're going to be disgraced, because what have they done? They've ended up bombing a bunch of poor people with sheep and goats for the last 8 or 9 years, and strafed their cities and killed all sorts of people, and killed our young people that had to go over there and fight. Basically, so somehow in their defective brains, they would achieve a higher status than the past generals that have failed in Afghanistan. Now, that's a really interesting thing right there. Because, you know, one of the things I know, because I've got friends that have gone to the war colleges, and I have friends that have been war planners. I have lots of different friends in lots of different places. So you think they would know better, because they've been taught exactly what happens in those kinds of situations. You know, basically a war with no clearly defined objectives except to hold ground, but you've got to hold ground with the enemy, etc., etc., etc. But somehow, when you want to achieve status, if you're in an organization like the military, the last thing you want to do is stand up and say, well, I'm going to go out there and lose that battle, or I'm going to go out there and lose the country. The power is going to gravitate to those that say they're going to win, even if what they say they're going to do has no support in history at all. And of course, we all know the military is a hierarchy. We'll talk more about hierarchies later, because they have a lot of different interesting things that go on inside them. But basically, you know, inside hierarchies, what happens with hierarchies, because they are interested in staying a hierarchy, they lose a sense of history. And so even though you're teaching all these people at the War College about what has happened in Afghanistan ever since Alexander the Great, the greatest berserker of all time, who turned the world upside down and basically is responsible for me sitting here with this camera, if you think about it, because he was the one that basically led to the triumph of Western civilization over Middle Eastern civilization. You know, he lost in Afghanistan. Even in spite of all that, in spite of teaching all these people this stuff, it doesn't matter, because hierarchies interested in stasis cannot understand nor appreciate or interpret history and see their place in there.